Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to NAUI's Dive Team Report. I'm your host, Greg Martin. You know, diving has a very rich history of a lot of trial and error, as well as exploration of the completely unknown. Many areas have had pioneers that have led the way for other divers, and of course, the Pacific Northwest is no different. Tom Hemphill is one of the diving pioneers from the Pacific Northwest who has also been working to recognize other contributors of Northwest diving history. Tom has also been a major part of the National Association of Underwater Instructors, and I'm really pleased to have Tom on the phone with us. So, Tom, talk to me a little bit about Northwest diving history.
Well, a few years ago, actually a few decades ago, I was speaking often with Al Tillman, who's NAUI number one, who has a huge collection of diving gear and memorabilia, and he and I were talking about putting together some kind of a museum in the Northwest. Well, one talk led to another, and then in 2010, when we had our 50th NAUI birthday party here in the Northwest, we did a little fundraiser selling some vintage dive gear, raised a little bit of money, put together a founding team, and decided we would form the Northwest Diving History Association as a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. The primary function and mission is to collect stories of the people and photographs of the people that made a difference. One of our board members mentioned that our most valuable resource, the resource that we're losing, are people and their stories. So we want to try to gather the stories as we can of the people that started diving in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and document some of the things that really made a difference in diving.
You mentioned Al Tillman. I mean, Al Tillman is kind of like the godfather, I guess, in a lot of ways, besides Jacques Cousteau. But Tillman was kind of the instigator behind a lot of this. And as you mentioned, we're losing a lot of those great stories.
That's the main thing. There's a lot of collections of old books, magazines, equipment. We have, here in the Northwest, we have the Nick Eichhorn collection, which is a huge collection, probably one of the largest in the world. And then we have a huge Cousteau collection as well at a museum in Tacoma that we work with. But the main thing that I have been focused on is getting the stories of the people, not necessarily the celebrities. Of course, Al Tillman's a celebrity, and Bill High and Spence Campbell, and you can tick off a few people that are celebrities and well-known in the industry. But we have an awful lot of people that started diving by the seat of their pants. Some of the stories are how people got started with diving, and those are some of the funny sea stories. So we're just trying to collect the stories and not lose those stories if we can.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned, too, the gear. I mean, because a lot of us that have been diving for a number of years, and some of us that have been diving for a great number of years, remember gear that doesn't anything remind us of today's gear. I mean, obviously double hose regulators, and this was pre-buoyancy compensator days. And a lot of that gear just doesn't exist anymore, other than, as you mentioned, in collections.
Yeah, and one of the concerns that we've had is what happens to these collections, and some of them are pretty extensive. I just was at a guy's garage about 6 months ago, and he has perhaps 6 foot lockers full of old dive gear. I said, well, what are you going to do with that? He said, well, one of these days. I said, well, one of these days is here. I said, let's get a museum set up and do something. Otherwise, your kids and grandkids are going to look at this and say, well, that's just garbage. It goes to the dump. And that's happened all too often.
Many, many times. Yeah, we see that happen. Sure.
Yeah. When I do presentations for dive clubs and dive stores, I've got a series of stories that I tell about what diving was like before. You mentioned buoyancy compensators, but how about before pressure gauges, when you had no clue what your air pressure was, And not that that was dangerous, because we did have J valves and R valves if people used them, and if they functioned properly, they weren't that dependable. But the most frustrating part of that on the stories that I tell is coming up from a dive that you really enjoyed and we were having a lot of fun. You would have loved to have stayed down there, but in your mind, you kind of thought, I'm low on air. So you get back to the car, take your regulator off, put a pressure gauge on, and find out that you still had 12 or 1,300 pounds. You could have stayed down there another 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so. But now I'm back at the car. It's beer time now,
Definitely. So you have Northwest diving history. There's the great website, divinghistory.com. And how do people get involved with this whole operation?
Actually, there's two websites. One is divinghistory.com, which was established by Tom Tillman, who's on our board of directors, and that's Al Tillman's son. And then from that, we also have divinghistory.org, which is the nonprofit association branch. And that's basically where we focus our membership. And people can go to that website, divinghistory.org, and take a look at that. Take a look at some of the pictures. A lot of video interviews on there. We got some great fun interviews. We're going to be doing some sea story contest coming up in about 3 weeks, and that'll be here in Vancouver, Washington. And we're going to videotape that, and hopefully we've got some people rehearsing some good stories. So that'll be fun. But membership information is on there. An annual membership is $25, and we appreciate that. There's 5-year memberships and business memberships as well.
And I think it's important that people, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, do get involved because, as you mentioned, it's not just the celebrities, it's those of us that have been part of the diving history here of this Northwest area. We just don't want to lose any of those stories. So, Tom, I encourage everybody to get out there and check out those two websites. I appreciate the fact that you're out there pitching and putting this all together for us. Thanks so much for joining us today, Tom.
Thank you, Greg.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for another NAUI Dive Team Report. Be sure again to check out that website, northwestdivinghistory.com or divinghistory.com and divinghistory.org. And until then, I'll see you underwater.